Hello and welcome to This Artworks. I'm Knibb and I am your host for Lichfield Radio's weekly arts and culture podcast. And this week I'm absolutely delighted to be joined in the studio by former poet laureate and writer Gary Longdon. Hello, Gary.
Good afternoon, Joss. Lovely to be here.
Thank you so much for coming in. I mean, you and I have known each other a little bit, haven't we, over the last few years? And you are a former poet laureate. I understand it was 2014?
Yes, it was. It seems like a long time ago now, but it keeps the benefits keep on rolling.
Frankly, 2014 feels like 2 minutes ago to
me. It certainly does, doesn't it?
Time really does fly. So what was that like, being laureate?
It was fantastic because it is do it yourself. So you don't really get any guidance. You have to make it up as you go along. The two highlights for me was that I wrote a poem for the Midlands Grand National at the Staffordshire Racecourse, and that was broadcast live on Channel 4. So I sort of immodestly claim an audience of 3.5 million for one of my poems, which was, whether anybody was paying any attention, of course, is another matter. But it was my sort of moment in the sun, although it was quite a wet day, as it always is for Midlands National. The other one was I did a commission for the Staffordshire Horde. And that was really interesting because to start off with, I thought Staffordshire Horde, that's going to be really great. And then I started thinking about it and it was like mud and nothing and nobody knows any of the story. And I spent about 3 months getting absolutely nowhere on it. So I happened to know where the Staffordshire Horde was buried, which is at Hammerwich. Yeah. And there's a pub there called The Boat. And my favourite poem is The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. The two things joined together because I was completely out of inspiration. So I thought I'd go down there. I thought, you know what, I'm going to go in the pub and have a pint and just see what comes to me. And in the corner was this old boy. And I thought to myself, what if he knew the story of the Staffordshire Horde? If you remember from The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, he'd go up to this old guy who says, yeah, you know, I've got a story to tell you. And so I imagined what the story would be. And out of nowhere came like 13,000 words. So I was really, and basically it's a faction. I know the historical context and I just created a story around it. And I was really pleased that it was performed at the New Vic Theatre in Newcastle under Lyme. So fortunately, it's got some legs. And what I hadn't really thought about was, of course, the Staffordshire Horde is always being re-shown in different places. And a copy of the manuscript now of my poem now travels around with it. Fantastic. So yes, it was really rather nice to be able to produce something out of nothing.
Oh, you've hit there on finding inspiration for your work. And you and I are writers, and we both know that it's possible to knock something out that approximates a poem, that's twinkly enough that if you squint. But you sound to me like a poet who doesn't ever do that, whose work always has a thought and a meaning behind it.
I think the answer is yes and no, in the sense that, like all of us writers and poets, we like to think that our work is meaningful and of a great gravitas. But the reality is that most people aren't interested in that. What they're interested in is smiling and something which is catchy. And a little bit of a vignette about that is that one of my more popular earlier poems was about Cheryl Cole. And I was very lucky to be invited to address the Library Theatre in Birmingham. And it was the great and the good. And there's a guy called Roy McFarlane, who's a brilliant poet, who was heading it. And he said, and I said to him, look, Roy, when am I going on? And he said, you're going on last, Gary. And I thought, no, do I want to go on last? That's really big pressure. I'm going to be really worried about it all the time. And he said, and Gary, you will be doing Cheryl Cole, won't you? And sure enough. And so I had to do it because it makes people laugh. So on the one hand, yes, I do like to write stuff of substance. Equally, I'm aware of the fact that we're here to be entertained as well. And in particular, the sort of events you and I go to, when we're going out in the evenings, people have got a lot of other things they could do. They can be with their kids, they can be at the gym, they can be at the cinema, they can be doing so much else rather than being at poetry evening. So you've got to make it worth their while. Yeah. And so I don't want to bore the pants off them. I want them to be able to go home and say, do you know what? I heard a really interesting poem about X. And if that happens, that's what stimulates me.
Absolutely. And I think we've all occasionally read work where you think, oh, that's strayed slightly into the self-indulgent. And I would say in which case that in addition to being a private poet, you're also quite a public poet. You write work for the public to enjoy.
Yeah, I think that unashamedly, I'm not a bedroom poet in the sense that what I mean by that is obviously that, that there are a lot of people who just scribble in pads in their bedrooms and it doesn't go any further. I do like to think that I've got something to say and try to and hope that it's to a wide audience as well. I'm very self-critical. I've got my computer is full of several hundreds of poems, and each time I look through them, I'm amazed at how bad the majority of them are. And then a top 10 sort of finds its way there, which changes over the years. But it's quite nice to be able to do that. So I do write a lot.
So when you write something and you look at it and you think, yeah, that's good, I got it there. How do you know?
I think that it's finding a turn of phrase, and I think that when you found an angle on things, because a lot of times people discuss topics, and I think, yeah, that's really boring. I'm doing a presentation in Wolverhampton over the weekend with Lichfield poets, and the topic is seasons, and I thought seasons. Really boring. Again, it was a question of trying to find an angle on all of that. And I wrote something about a wolf in the autumn who was starving on the edge of a hillside, and how it felt to be in this barren land, looking out for something to eat and realising that the packs are moving on and you might die. So that was so I extrapolated the idea of seasons, picked on winter, did that. And for me, whether the poem's any good or not, it's for anybody else to judge. But once I'd done that, I thought, yeah, that's the angle to find on it. So it's not so much the topic, it's the way that you get into it, which I think is interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it could have been another poem about snowdrops, couldn't it? Not
could
that
indeed.
You would write something like
Absolutely
that.
not.
That's what it sort of leads me to think about. You've delivered workshops all over the place, haven't you?
Yeah.
Including one, I understand, in a prison.
True.
And what was that like?
Really, really interesting. It was at Swinton Hall. Firstly, it's out of myths, and that's that prison is cushy. They all hate it. So that's the first thing. Second thing is that you're locked in a room with these prisoners, some of whom are only there because it gets them out of the cell. And I was 7 doors away from the prison officers. You don't have a prison officer with you.
Right.
And there's double doors in each door.
Yeah.
So there were 14 doors between me and help. And one of the things that they said to me is, on no account confront a prisoner. And I thought to myself, I'm not going to be confronting any prisoners with that.
Yeah.
But a nice vignette is that we were doing a little writing workshop there, and this prisoner was struggling to write, and he said, "Look, Mister, I'm really stuck here." And I said, "Well, just use the 5 senses." And he said, "What's that?" And so I told him, about touch, smell, and whatever. And this guy, his name's Carl. And he was a drug hitman, so he was serving 10 years for grievous bodily harm. And if you wanted to find a drug hitman, he would undoubtedly be your choice. He was mean, he was lean, he was aggressive, he was, he really was the embodiment of a sort of muscle. Anyway, so I said to him, "Well, what's your favourite smell?" And he paused and he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "What smell do you like the most?" He paused again and he said, "It's the smell of my little boy's scalp when he comes to visit." And I think all of us know that young children's scalps smell very distinctive. And I just thought that on the one hand, you had undoubtedly a nasty thug. On the other hand, you had that humanity underneath it as well. And the other little snapshot of it is that obviously I took advice from colleagues who'd worked in prisons, and they said on no account get them to write about prison officers, about jail doors and things like that. He said they don't want to do that. And so I encouraged them to write about something else. And the best poem that came out of the day was this guy who again was serving a life sentence, who wrote about cooking bread on the top of a Swiss mountain.
Fascinating.
Which sounds bizarre, doesn't it? But if you think about it, you're stuck in a cell in Lichfield, serving a life sentence. Where would you rather be? On, the freedom and the vistas on top of a mountain and the smell of fresh bread. And I think that tells you a lot about incarceration and what it does to you, it's to you inside.
Absolutely. And a lot about poetry and about what poetry does, capturing that essence, that tiny little moment in time that we can all relate to.
Absolutely.
Poetry that does well, does it well anyway. Who are your favourite poets?
I think that Coleridge is my favourite sort of classical poet. I think, though, that the people just do not realise how many brilliant modern poets there are out there. There's a young woman called Holly McNeish, who is coming to Lichfield very shortly. Sadly, I think the shows are already sold out.
Is she a
at the Hub.
Scottish poet?
No, she's not. She is incredibly clever. She's a Cambridge graduate. And she also had graduated from a university in the Caribbean, which obviously was odd. It was Guadeloupe. And I said to her, Guadeloupe, they speak French there, don't they? I said, so how did you do that? She said, well, I did it in French. So I said, so hang on here. You can get a degree from Cambridge doing it in English, and then you get a degree in, it was something mad like agricultural sciences. You do that in French. And she just said, yeah. And I think, again, we were talking earlier on about where you get your inspiration from and angles. And that is a great example of somebody who is so diverse in terms of their experience. So I think, Holly McNeish, I would rate very highly. There's a guy called Roy Marshall who lives quite close to here, who's got several books out, who's really good as well. Roy McFarlane, they don't all have to be called Roy, is also very good. So I would encourage people to get out there and to try modern poets, because there's so much brilliant stuff out there.
And you can come across new writers. I was recently given the book Dandelions by Arthur Berry.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, the talent of that man, extraordinary work. And I had never heard of him before. Beautiful stuff. But it's interesting that you also like the romantic poets as well.
Yeah, I think it's just a question of where you come from. So I'm a bit romantic and gushy, and so I quite enjoy romantic, gushy poetry. And so, Kubla Khan, Rhyme the Ancient Mariner, those probably would be my two favourites, amongst others.
Ode to a Nightingale?
Ode to a Nightingale, lovely as well.
I mean, wow. Honestly, just dropped the mic, didn't he, after that one? Blimey. Talented devil. And you've been, you've headlined at many festivals, haven't you? Poetry festivals, including obviously our Lichfield Festival.
Yeah.
What's that like, headlining at a festival?
I think daunting, because you do get a combination of what I call the poetry cognoscenti, the people who know what's what, and the people who just happen to be there in between going to do something else. So the real trick is being able to try and capture those other people. And I must admit, I do have set lists, and I do have bits of paper to one side, and I sort of broadly prepare what I'm going to do. But often you have to roll with the punches.
Yeah.
I did one over in Much Wenlock, and it was an august, educated audience in the summer, which was brilliant, under a tent. What I hadn't appreciated was behind there was a pub and a beer garden. And they all decided they were going to listen to what was going on as well. And I immediately scrapped all my erudite stuff and thought, right, Cheryl Cole is on. It was just going to be the stuff which, if you catch their attention in the first 10 seconds, you're there. If not, they're going to be clinking their glasses and their sort of cutlery. So, I think that it is daunting. And I think having to respond to the people in front of you is vital and what's very enjoyable.
But that's commissions, isn't it? Sometimes you get a commission in and you think, who's the audience for this?
Exactly.
Do I have to be a polite poet? Yeah. And as we know, it's tricky doing good work when you have to be incredibly polite about things. How do you handle commissions?
I think that I always just use them as a starting point. And I think that picking up what you were talking about earlier on, I think I'm always looking to find an angle which will interest people. And so either the people who are commissioning it like the angle, in which case great news, and inevitably sometimes they don't, in which case bad news. and it is back to the drawing board when it comes to what you're doing. But obviously, I think that poetry doesn't pay, and so any situation whereby people are giving you money to do something, you try to do something which is going to keep them to keep them happy. And I'm not ashamed to say that either. There's absolutely no point in doing something which is just provocative and going to annoy the person who's commissioned you in the first place.
Oh, absolutely not. People who are willing to give you money for poetry, they are
grateful.
precious individuals.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Gary, you were telling me before we started this interview that you are finishing a play at the moment.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, it's called The Last Witch, and it's a true story. It's the story of Helen Duncan, and Helen Duncan was an impoverished psychic in the early 1920s, who basically made money. She had 9 children. There's a place called Callender in central Scotland. Had no money, but she did earn a few bob, basically doing mediumship readings. Anyway, she did that, was successful, but she also was professing to be able to produce spirit out of her throat, which is a bit unusual. And she was taken to Glasgow court for false mediumship, and she was jailed for it, which obviously is pretty unusual.
As opposed to real mediumship.
Exactly. Yeah. How can you tell the difference? But anyway, that's what she did, and she became very popular. Then time moved on, and the war broke out. The great thing about war is that people die, people go missing, and so people's need for the spiritual increases massively. And she built up a massive reputation as a great spiritual medium, which brought her further and further south into England, where she continued to be really popular. Then fast forward that to 1944 and D-Day. You might think, where's this going? It's a really interesting one. She was giving a reading in Portsmouth, and this was about 6 months before D-Day. And she told this woman that her son had died, which really shouldn't do, at a reading and in a ship that had sunk. Now, this was a bit shocking, and it was news to everybody because the story had not been broken that the ship had sunk. But actually it had sunk, okay, with all hands. And clearly the War Office don't announce losses until it actually suits them. And this is one of the cases. Now, her reputation had gone before her, and MI5 basically had gone along to see what she was up to. Now, the agent from MI5 who went along was none other than Ian Fleming, okay?
Good grief.
So obviously they were really concerned on a couple of counts. Firstly, is she a German spy? Okay. If she is she going to be reporting what's going on because the D-Day preparations? Or is she psychic? And if she's genuinely psychic, is she going to be able to predict the date of D-Day and obviously ruin everything for the Allies? So what happens then is that she is arrested. She's taken to the Old Bailey, and she is tried for witchcraft.
No.
Okay. Now, the Witchcraft Act dates back to 1775.
Yeah.
Okay, that is how far back it goes. Now, she was actually really popular, and this is where it continues to get interesting. So much so that the literati of the day, in particular playwrights and reviewers, were 100% behind her because she was visited by their by their clientele, and none other than Winston Churchill also had a reading from her as well, and he was very concerned about what was going on. So on the back of that, she is imprisoned. She's convicted, obviously, under the Witchcraft Act 1775, and she's sent to Pentonville.
She's convicted of witchcraft?
Of witchcraft, okay, in 1945.
Good grief.
Okay, from 1775. She's sent to Pentonville. But she's a celebrity, and the warders refuse to lock her door. Instead... Instead, there's just lines and lines of women going for readings from her. So she's let out after sort of a month or so. She's basically more trouble than she's worth, and this was after D-Day as well. So that bit is good, and she's made to promise that she's not going to do any more mediumship, which she sticks to for a few years, but breaks what she's doing, but she's continuing to be monitored by MI5, who realise what she's doing because they're still concerned about her, whether she's some sort of spy. And so one of her readings meetings is raided. At this stage, she will be in her 50s. And she's arrested, she's manhandled, she's strip searched as well by male officers. And she is sort of incarcerated with a view to being jailed, and she dies from her injuries.
Good grief.
Now, obviously, that also causes great outrage.
Yeah.
And on the back of that, forgive me, the name of the MP escapes me, but in the furore that there was, a Labour MP then moved the repeal of the Witchcraft Act, which is which will have been in the mid 1950s, incredibly, and the act was suitably rescinded. So an incredible story which takes in so many different sort of features.
Absolutely.
And as I say, having the added spice of Ian Fleming, of having the Second World War, of D-Day, a trial, and obviously all writers love a trial in the middle of it as well, really means that there's an awful lot to go on.
So this lady was, and what was her name again?
Helen Duncan.
Helen Duncan. She was, in essence, the last woman killed for being accused of witchcraft because of the injuries from when they... honestly, isn't history and the world and time just the most mind-blowing thing?
Well, I just find it mad that in the mid-1940s, somebody was being prosecuted under an act from 1775.
Yeah.
And that's why she's known as the last witch. I mean, I think technically there was another prosecution after that, but it wasn't high profile.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a sleight of hand.
Yes.
But for all intents and purposes, she was one that provoked it, and the act was rescinded or repealed, should I say, on the back of all that.
So what do you think? Do you think she was a true medium?
I think this is so difficult because I do know a number of people in the Mind Body Spirit community, and I'm torn because I think that there are some people who appear to have a gift. I think there's an awful lot of other people out there who what I call play the numbers game and take advantage of human frailty and people wanting to believe as well. But unquestionably, just as I was taken along to a reading once, and I got picked on by the reader, and I didn't like him. Okay, for a start, but he just picked on me and gave me some facts about my past, which nobody else could possibly have known. He gave me the date of my late wife's birthday. He gave me the model of car and the colour of the car that she was driving, and all sorts of similar things associated with that. And I had to tell him to stop. Wow. Because it was like being, you get a series of punches. And I've had enough. So on the one hand, common sense tells you, okay, that it's not true. But practicality tells you that that I have experienced something which happened, and who knows what the real thing is there.
Well, I mean, it's always been culturally something that we have not exactly a strong belief in, but a not a disbelief, and I imagine that is down to experiences like yours.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, just I also at the same time I got taken to a table tipping event, and that's where tables fly around. And again, sitting in front of you here, Joss, as far as I'm concerned, tables do not move on their own. Okay, it's as simple as that. Didn't think it before, don't think it now. But at this event, I was at a table with 3 other people with this medium, and the table started to move around. And so I'm thinking, right, these 3 other people, they're moving it. So I looked at their fingers to see whether they were physically tensing, and they weren't, okay? And so I thought, well, what on earth is going on here? And then the medium who was there made an excuse, said, I need to go to the toilet, and left the room. And the table still moved.
Gosh.
And so, again, I don't believe it. I don't believe it now. Didn't believe it beforehand, but something happened. Who knows?
This is it. Who knows? But it sounds like it's going to be an absolutely fascinating play.
Well,
is the manuscript finished?
Not quite.
Right.
The problem is, I think you'll probably understand, is that there is so much in there. It's all in the editing.
Yeah.
And so I'm not quite sure how it's going to sort of finish.
Especially as a stage play as well, because that's a big amount of time to include in the stage play. I'm sure you do a fantastic job.
I'm not sure. Well, Ernest Hemingway made a famous comment about the last man, the old man and the sea, and he was asked about it, and he said the last chapter was the most difficult. And the interviewer said, "Well, why is that?" And he said, "Didn't you have the right words?" And Hemingway said, "I had the right words. I didn't have the right order."
Yeah.
And that's how I feel about, as you will gather, the words, the story is there.
Yeah.
It's how you put it together. It's going to be fun.
Yes, absolutely. Stage plays are tricky beasts.
Yeah.
But I'm sure you do a fantastic job. You run Poetry Like Do You Not in Lichfield.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that started back in 2009. It's an open mic event. What that means is that anybody can turn up, and they've got 3 minutes to perform whatever they want to perform within those 3 minutes. Traditionally, we have one or two headliners, and the objective of having those headliners is firstly to be able to ensure that the quality is there, and secondly, it's to be able to inspire the people that are there as well. We're quite fortunate in the Midlands in having a lot of people within striking distance that you can sort of inveigle in if you try hard enough. And so that's quite a good way of bringing them along. I'm proud of the fact that it's lasted that period of time, because a lot of other events haven't survived that period of time. And that's really down to the people of Lichfield, actually, because they come along and support it. Without the audience, you can't do anything. We'd just be talking to ourselves.
Yeah.
So, that's...
How would people find out more about these events and get involved?
Okay, we've got on Facebook, if you Google Lichfield Poets, then that will tell you what's on. We tend to meet on Tuesday evenings at the King's Head. And I can't resist just mentioning that on the 17th of this month at the King's Head at 7:30, we've got a wonderful poet called Nick Degg. Nick is the current Stoke Poet Laureate.
He's great. Yeah.
And also he's very light. He's very personable. He's loads of fun, and he epitomises what we're about. In other words, this is not a boring night out. This is better than Coronation Street, I promise you.
I mean, I've been to a couple of your events and they are fantastic. They're cracking. They really are. And they're in the pub as well. What's not to like?
Exactly, yes.
We are getting to the last few minutes of our interview, sadly. So I'm going to ask you if you wouldn't mind showing me the item that you have brought for Bring the Thing.
Yes. This is a solid mahogany figurine of a young Maasai warrior just after he's come of age. And what they do is they send out, I think it's at the age of 14 or 15, they send them out in a walkabout across the desert without any food or weapons, and they have to survive on their own for 4 or 5 days. And at the end of that, they become men. And this figurine is striking. And interestingly enough, although it's a male figure, it's got long dangly earrings and a ponytail at the back as well. So it just goes to show that androgyny was popular in other cultures as well. It is of a Maasai warrior, and I think what's nice is that it looks striking, but it means something as well. My father was given it when he served in the Air Force. He was serving out in Kenya, and he was given it by a Maasai chief. So it's got double significance for me. It's a gift from my father, but also a gift from the Maasai people to my father as well. So I'm rather fond of it. It's
a beautiful thing, isn't it? Absolutely gorgeous. And of course, you're a man who enjoys travelling.
Absolutely, yes.
You've just come back from Norway,
I've come back from Norway and from the Shetlands, where they have the Up Heliar Festival, which basically has 10,000 torchbearers, and they burn a longship in the harbour. So it goes back to Viking times. It's a tremendous event, and it was very cold. The seas were very rough, but it's a wonderful opportunity to go out and explore other cultures.
I mean, it sounds absolutely wonderful, and you have been a wonderful guest. Thank you so much for joining us. Will you come on again and talk to us?
If invited, I'd be delighted to come on.
That's lovely. Thank you so much, Gary.
Thank you, Joss.
Good night.